In April 2016, a group of fishermen in Amman, Jordan, found a piece of ambergris weighing roughly 3.5 pounds. They sold it for $70,000. Later that year, the same group found another piece weighing around 175 pounds. This time, that piece was estimated to be worth over $3 million. Just for comparison, the market price for gold is roughly $4.8 million for the same weight. But that's gold, and that makes sense. We're talking about something that comes out of a whale. What makes ambergris so valuable, and who are the people paying millions of dollars for it? The reason why this thing that comes out of a whale is so expensive is because it contains ambergris. Well, what exactly is it? Ambergris, also known as grey amber, is a waxy flammable solid. It has a pale grey or black color, and it's created in the digestive system of sperm whales. Originally, the name ambergris came from a French word ambre gris, which means grey amber. A lot of people thought it was fossilized tree resin, which is amber by definition. So they gave it the name ambergris. Before we knew it came from a whale, many people also speculated that it was made by bees along the coastline. But a lot of other people simply call it the gold of the seas. While its use in the body of a sperm whale is still under debate, its purpose on land is used all over the world, and a lot of it is right under your nose. The price of this substance has only increased because of its benefits and various uses. Ambergris is soluble in many substances such as alcohol, chloroform, as well as volatile and stable oils. This is the reason why it's usually used in fragrances and other scents. Even without the distinctive scent, ambergris properties alone make it a valuable substance. This alone is enough to make it valuable in the fragrance industry. A lot of raw materials in fragrances are actually quite volatile. For example, ambergris is used to equalize vapor pressures for rare perfumes such as musk. That way, the scent of the perfume will last longer. But how? Odor chemist George Preti knows a lot about the properties of ambergris. The molecules are lipophilic, which means the molecules are attracted to fat. Most other perfume molecules are lipophilic as well, but the ambergris molecules are even larger and heavier. According to Preti, odor molecules have a high affinity for other lipophilic molecules. That way, the molecules don't go into the vapor phase all at once. Ambergris actually also enhances the other smells within a fragrance, just as the way salt enhances flavors and spices. What's the special substance in ambergris? It contains ambroin, which is the chemical component which gives it its distinct smell. Once the ambroin oxidizes, it produces ambroxide and ambronol. Ambroxide is the unique scent that scent manufacturers are looking for. However, there are plenty of other uses. For example, ambergris is used as an aphrodisiac. It was previously used as a treatment for heart disease. It also gives high-quality flavor to food. It's known that the first ice cream recipe in the 16th century used ambergris as a flavoring. The recipe was found in a manuscript written by Lady Anne Fanshawe of England. Many people have tried to recreate Fanshaw's recipe, but it takes only the most adventurous people to eat it. That's because ice cream with ambergris has a pleasant aroma like vanilla in the beginning. But when it begins to melt, the smell becomes unpleasant for most people. Ice cream isn't the only recipe to contain ambergris. One award-winning cocktail bar called Billy Sunday in Chicago actually used it in some of their drinks. Historically, ambergris was used in medicines and spices in the East and in perfumes in the West. For example, the Japanese historically have used ambergris in kodo, which is a ceremony involving special fragrances. Back in the Middle Ages, ambergris was used to treat all different kinds of illnesses, such as the common cold. In fact, ambergris was so valuable back then, the Portuguese took over the Maldives in the 16th century just because they had better access to all the ambergris around. Later, during the bubonic plague pandemic, people carried around a piece of ambergris to mask the air. Today, many high-end brands such as Saint Laurent, Gucci, and Chanel use it in their perfumes. Chanel No. 5 is one example. Also, ambergris is a product used in cigarettes in Egypt for its scent. But over time, its use declined when chemists created industrial materials with the same pressure equalization characteristics as ambergris, making it less important for the manufacture of fragrances. Most perfumes now use synthetic versions. However, the scent is slightly changed. Only the most demanding perfumers will use real ambergris. So how exactly is it made? Ambergris is formed from the secretions of the bile duct in the intestine of a whale. But it doesn't happen in all whales. It only happens in male sperm whales. The sperm whale population left is estimated to only be around 300 to 450,000. So that's what makes ambergris so rare. When ambergris was first studied, the beaks of giant squid were found inside the lumps of ambergris. But why? The theory is that ambergris is needed to help the whale digest the squid beak, and because the beak is extremely sharp, the whale needs to protect its intestines when the beak is passed through. Sperm whales eat large quantities of cephalopods such as squid, so they're digesting a lot of sharp beaks. In most cases, whales throw up big indigestible parts, but for smaller parts, they need some assistance. Ambergris grows in size more and more inside the whale over the years. Some researchers think that ambergris is excreted from the body of the whale with its feces, but other researchers think that because of how large ambergris gets, it can't physically pass through the digestive system, so it comes out as vomit. This is still up for debate. The largest discovered chunk of ambergris was found in Australia and weighed over 1,000 pounds. For comparison, that's more than the weight of 2 motorcycles combined. Ambergris takes years to form, but once it comes out of the whale, it often floats for a while before actually reaching land. A lot of times it's simply found floating in the water, but sometimes it's also found in the stomachs of dead sperm whales. Experts classify ambergris in different ways. The most common method is to classify them according to color. White ambergris is the most valuable, the purest, and the oldest. The waxy texture of white ambergris is solid, and the scent is unbelievably pleasant, supposedly, according to perfumers. The least valuable ambergris is black. It basically looks like feces, so that means it recently just came out of the whale's body and it does smell like fresh manure. It's mostly soft with a very slightly malleable feel to it. Then there's everything in between. Ambergris is sometimes called fool's gold. This is because a lot of people think they found ambergris, but most of the time this isn't the case. People go to experts with these pieces, but they find out that it's nothing but wax, rocks, or the remains of fossilized animals. Dark gray ambergris can have a silvery white effect across its surfaces. This is the beginning sign of oxidation. Earthy brown ambergris is starting to smell less like manure. Supposedly, its scent is sweeter and warmer. Light gray to pure white ambergris is the rarest. Some of the pure white pieces are completely oxidized, and these pieces are the oldest. They have the most pleasant, perfume-like scent of any type of ambergris. So what would you do if you ever came across ambergris? There's an infamous test called the needle test. It's done by inserting a hot needle into the material to see if it will turn into a tar-like liquid. However, what most experienced people who work in the industry are looking for is the right scent. This test is extremely misleading to ordinary people who don't know what they're looking for. Ambergris needs about a decade of floating on the ocean's surface to basically fully mature. The longer it floats on the surface of the ocean, the better it smells. It's described as soft and similar to the smell of musk. To get the most accurate results, chemists will perform lab tests to examine the benzoic acid and cholesterol inside the waxy sample. The benzoic acid, along with the ambroin, another secretion of the whale's digestive system, is what allows the ambergris to hold its fragrance for a long time. Ambergris isn't easy to get, it isn't easy to sell, and it certainly isn't easy to keep. It's technically illegal to own it or trade it in the US, but that certainly doesn't stop some people from getting their hands on it. Because sperm whales are a protected endangered species, governments don't want people to look for ambergris. Historically, whaling increased dramatically from the 18th to the mid-19th century. Some reports say that roughly 50,000 whales were killed every year over the course of the 19th century. Although ambergris usually wasn't the main reason why people hunted sperm whales back then, they were hunted for their blubber, which was made into oil. The ambergris was seen just as an added bonus. While it's illegal to own and trade ambergris in many countries around the world, it's uncommon for someone to actually be arrested for it. Rahul Tupari, a resident of Nagpur, India, got caught selling a chunk of ambergris worth over $230,000. It was illegal under the Wildlife Protection Act, which in India prohibits the sale of any of the parts of any endangered animal. However, in most European countries, it's perfectly legal to trade and possess ambergris. While sperm whale products are still banned, ambergris is actually an exception. This is because it's simply a byproduct of the sperm whale. American perfume companies no longer mix ambergris into their fragrances. It's most likely because of the confusing legalities. International companies, however, as we've hinted at earlier, will still do it. Ambergris trader and expert Bernard Perrin has no problem finding French perfume companies to sell to. He says that he also sells it to royal families in the Middle East, where they continue to use it as an aphrodisiac. A lot about ambergris remains a mystery. For example, why is ambergris more commonly found in the southern hemisphere, even though sperm whales are all over the world? Why is it only found in sperm whales? And particularly only male sperm whales create ambergris.